shorted high voltage cable screen. Yep, that's what we're talking about today. So how do we fix the problem that our monitor is telling us that we have? Number one, if you have tried to restart suddenly after stopping, you can get this screen by accident. But if this is occurring repeatedly, you do have a short that's beginning to happen. So how do we find out where's the short on a 15,000 volt system? Well, process of elimination. So step number one, we go to the cart. So the first part of the elimination or of the isolation is to remove our high voltage cable from our transformer terminal. As you can see, we've already done this. Basically, at that point, any errors or any problems that we have is isolated inside the cart. So if we don't have any problems inside of our cart, we will no longer get our screen. So step one, unhook your high voltage transfer cable that goes forward to the front boom from the left-hand side transformer terminal. We're going to drive through the field with it saying Zapper is running, no warnings. We'll move on to step two. Step number two, we have our high voltage transfer cable here. This is bringing power from our cart up to our front boom. So we're going to leave it and it only attached to our front bar. So we have to unhook all of our wing wires, and you'll notice how close our hinge points or how close our pipes are. 15,000 volts will jump between these 2 points. So you cannot unhook only one side of the cable, you have to unhook both. Otherwise you can still get that false trigger. So on a 40-foot bar, you have 4 wing wires, 8 connection points. I recommend unhooking everything, run just our center section with no wires hooked up, then begin hooking them back up 1 wire at a time, so 2 ends at a time. These are done with wing nuts. It doesn't take very long. You have to drive through the field with it saying Zapper is running. That's just part of the diagnostic process. I know it's frustrating, I'm sorry, but we're talking about a 30-minute long diagnostic process here, and if you'll bear with me, we'll get it right, we'll get you back up and running. Okay, so hypothetically, we're going to say that our issue was right here, and this wing wire that goes around and comes over to here, we're carrying power from our center electrode to our main wing electrode. We're going to say that this is our problem. Well, now what do? I've got to finish. I've got weeds coming. Well, I'm going to show you how to do what I call a wing wire bypass. So number one, we're going to unhook our cable here because we have isolated and found out whenever we hooked this cable back up, we started getting problems. So we know this is our problem. I'm not going to destroy this cable because this one's not actually bad, but I do have another one here for the purpose of the video. So I'm going to unhook both ends of it. Once again, these are wing nuts, so this is a fairly simple process, doesn't require a lot of tooling. I usually carry pliers on my side, you may or may not. I'm going to secure these back out of the way for the purpose of the video. Now typically what you would do would be cut off this end. If you cut this end of it off, you can pull that cable right back through and pull it out over there. You have a cable just like what I have here for demonstration purposes. You have a cable to build a bypass out of. So here's one that I had inside that does have a bad spot on it. You'll notice that we have the original end still on one end because we pulled it out this way. The other end doesn't have an end on it. I've stripped off about 4 or 5 inches. I don't know if you can see it there in front of my hand, but about 4 or 5 inches of insulation. I just used my pocket knife to do that. I didn't have any special tooling because I'm in the same field that you're in. Wouldn't do any good to have a bunch of fancy tools to do this with. So I'm going to take this, I'm actually going to loop it through there a little bit. Basically, I want it to be pulling on the wire. So you see that I've looped it through. I'm going to wrap it around, stick it back and under there. Now, one trick, it sure would be great to have a washer because it doesn't want to stay on there. Here's my old end. Once again, no fancy tools, no fancy tricks. I put it on top of there, and that works remarkably close to the same way that a washer would work. I'll put my nut back on there, tighten it down, and we'll carry on with the video. Now you may be asking yourself, so if the cable is bad, how are we reusing it? Well, in case you didn't notice, this is 15,000 volts of power right here. It's the same thing whether it's bare or not. The copper is bare also. So I'm going to wrap this around there, usually about 3 times on this side. And you notice these things in my hand, I call that City Boy baling wire. They're zip ties. You can use electrical tape, but a zip tie in the tractor is a pretty handy piece of equipment to have. When we used to work on the farm all the time, we always had baling wire, but now we've moved up to zip ties or moved down to zip ties, depending on how you see it. Once again, same thing on this end. We're going to wrap it around. You notice that I'm pulling on the outside corners. I'm wrapping straight up. I'm going to put it back on there, put my wing nut back on. Make sure they're good and tight. If your wing nut is loose there, it can cause a trigger of a shorted high voltage cable. So, make sure that your wing nuts are good and tight at all connection points. Now you can see the wire is actually suspended by the arms. I'm not pulling on it down here because I've wrapped it and I've zip tied it, right? So even whenever weeds come and they pull on this, you see the arms moving, it makes it a pretty stable deal. This will get you by for 2 or 3 days. Your kit would have had spare wing wires in it when it was shipped to you. If you have not replaced those, if you used one, replace it. Call our parts department, 660-620-2993, Tony. Call Dalton, 620-6309. Call our parts department, get some parts on hand. These are not incredibly expensive, but this is a way to get by. I do want to show you one little thing right here. I don't know if you can see that in the video or not, but on this particular wing wire here, I've actually identified where our issue was. That looks like nothing, but we're dealing with 15,000 volts. 15,000 volts here, folks. It doesn't take much. This right here was the damage spot on this wing wire, and that was enough to trigger the system. Don't be frustrated by this system. This system is put in place to keep you safe and to keep your equipment safe. We don't want 15,000 volts getting to you. We don't want 15,000 volts getting to your equipment. So respect the system, learn to work with it. Thanks for watching the video, and have a blessed day.